Hello and welcome. I can't help but have a sneaky peek at the first comment as I was sitting down then, because just to remind you, I don't go through the questions in the comments section other than to quickly reply and say that I will address them here and now whilst talking to you. So you get a standard reply to that effect. So I don't pre-consider my answers. Occasionally one will catch my eye and I might think about it for a moment, but I try not to. This is the point of my practice, avoiding social media and discussion groups of any kind. Many people write saying, oh, can you join us for this interview? Can you do this? Can you do that? Could we collaborate in this particular project? So my practice is such that I live alone in order to keep my precepts, practice meditation, and develop wisdom. Sila Samadhi Panya. This discussion of Dharma, by way of responding to your comments, is complementary to that, but restricted to a very short part of my time, taking up no more than a few hours a week, literally no more than a few hours a week, an hour a day, 3 days a week. The live puja I'm doing anyway, that's there for you every morning to share with me. So this is the first opportunity I have really to look at the comments. Emails I respond to directly, and I do obviously give those the consideration they deserve. And if any questions regarding your practice and meditation, I'm always happy to answer personally and directly to you. But that's not what I talk about here. They're private. This is in the public domain. But as far as my discussions in the public domain go. So all the content on this channel, English Buddhist Monk, is there. It's available for anyone to use or ignore, but I don't wish to collaborate in any other activities than that, because it would become disturbing to my practice. Whereas this is very controlled, contained, and conducive to developing thought also around the same kind of questions that I may come up with myself. So here we are. Do you personally know what is after death, or are you repeating a teaching that you have been given or are required to teach with your or via your tradition? So I think you know, someone asking that question knows I don't know what happens after death any more than you know what happens after death, unless you're under the misconception that well, what could there be? Who do we know ever? Have we ever known? There are people who have died, so supposedly died, had near-death experiences, near-death experiences. But by the very nature that they've come back to life and recount the tale is like someone who's been to France and come back again. They can tell you a little bit about what France is like, but they've never lived an entire life. They've never been French. They've only visited. They've been a tourist. You've only had a brief glimpse or experience of the physical body dying and sense consciousness, the brain, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and feeling, touching, ceasing at a point. And then whatever phenomena may come up in the mind as a result of that is your experience, and that alone. This isn't death. So no one has experienced death. So on that basis, having not died yet, I don't know what is after death, other than what we know prior to our birth. We have all been born into this life, and it therefore experienced rebirth from a previous life. But what is transferred from previous lives into this life is not a person, a personality. It is not intellectual or physical attributes. It is not a soul. If it was, we would know about our previous life in great detail, and therefore what it's like in a previous life, and could make logical assumptions based on that as to what it is like after death. Because if we were alive once before and we can remember it to the detail of day-to-day activities and such like, and some in deep states of jhana can have great recall of previous lives, but more often than not, it is qualities we've developed in previous lives that give us proof and evidence that this isn't our first time in the human realm. So my experiences in meditation, not to go into them in too much detail, are such that I know I haven't developed those within this lifetime because no one's been able to teach me how to get those experiences and about those experiences. But what this tradition does, and what my teachers have told me, is not what I'm repeating, but it's the same as the Buddha's teachings, that we are to experience this for ourselves, find out, investigate and find out for ourselves what it is that we can attain within this lifetime. And that can include a glimpse of nibbana, emptiness, which can logically assumed to be, if we can cut all attachments to rebirth, what happens after we die. But actually what happens after we die is of no consequence, or shouldn't be our focal point, because what is going to determine what happens after we die, whatever our knowledge or beliefs, ideas or notions may be, is only going to be as a result of what we're doing in this current lifetime, in this moment, in fact. So if we believe in heaven and hell, it still means we need to be good in this lifetime if we don't want to go to hell and we want to go to heaven. If we want to attain to nibbana, we must keep the precepts and practice meditation. But we don't go to nibbana. It isn't a place. It isn't describable. So in answer to your question specifically, do I know what is after death? No, this isn't a question that we will come to find out. But we won't necessarily find it out in the way we expect. We won't be seeing after death, hearing, smelling, tasting and touching after death, because these sense organs, and I do know this, will be dead, will be gone. Our eyes, our ears deteriorate rapidly as we age. You can see that deterioration or witness the lack of being able to see well, close up or at a distance. Hearing can fail completely. Our minds can become unable to remember things. We can get dementia. This physical body deteriorates whilst we're alive. We can witness, we can see that. So when there's no blood circulating the system, the heart ceases to beat, there's no oxygen reaching the vital organs, and we're physically dead, there is no vijnana, sense consciousness, resulting from contact, rupa, bodily contact of eyes, ears, nose, mouth, skin. There will even be no thinking process of the thinking brain. The mind, that which knows, it's present and witness, is independent of that experience, but witnessing of that experience. So I don't actually even repeat the teachings of the Buddha by way of quotation, because too, I believe that we can all read his words in the sutras as closely as they will ever be interpreted to the time he was teaching, and warrant no further explanation. And as in his words, he is suggesting that we should try and experience for ourselves anyway. He's not asking us to go out and say, this is the way it is, this is how it should be done, but giving us guidance and reflections to really take support from, security in, refuge in, to enable our practice for us to see clearly ourselves. I remember that you mentioned reading some autobiographies of Buddhist monks that you have found useful. I'm hoping you might recommend one or two of these. Well, off the top of my head, it's not just Buddhist monks. I mean, there's wonderful amounts of literature a lot of literature that you might read, older literature one might have read, certainly relates to Buddhism very directly. Something I've reread recently is Walden on Thoreau, that many people have read. I wouldn't necessarily attribute to Buddhism, but it's very much the life I live, the monastic life I'm living, and the philosophy of Buddhism that this man in the 1800s, mid to late 1800s, was describing in North America there. So it's not just Buddhist monks' biographies. A lot of Buddhist monks' biographies are very poetic and very nice, but are a little bit fabulistic or hero-telling stories if they're not autobiographies. But one very beautifully written and very accurate, I understand, but very accurate portrayal of an enlightened forest master's life is that of Ajahn Jayasaro's book, Still Flowing. Oh, is it called Still Flowing? But Ajahn Chah's autobiography written by Ajahn Jayasaro, who is a disciple of Ajahn Chah. It's a very beautifully written book, and it doesn't have all of the overly exaggerated or some of the over-exaggerated tales that often make for exciting reading and aren't necessarily always that accurate a depiction of a monk's life. Because after all, if you think about it, a monk's life, his biography, day to day, it's quite boring, isn't it? If you were to come and stay here with me for a week or a month, you'd be very bored if you weren't a practitioner, someone who just wants to sit and just meditate. And even then, you might find it very difficult because of the environment that we're in. So there's not much to contain or to write about there. So often they're excited up, these biographies. But they are inspirational. But don't get too bogged down in reading. Get bogged down in practicing. So there's one, the biography of Ajahn Chah by Ajahn Jayasaro, and Ajahn Mun's biography written by Longtar Mahaboa. It's a little bit exaggerated and poetic, but he was the founder of Thai forest Buddhism today. He revitalized Thai forest Buddhism. So he's the epitome of a Thai forest monk. Now, I'm not a Thai forest monk, but I practice in that style, in that way, having been introduced to Buddhism via Thai forest monks in my own country, and then subsequently having spent a lot of time in those monasteries in Thailand. But I'm just a bog standard Theravada Buddhist monk, if I have to have any label at all, but practicing in accordance with the Vinaya Pitaka specifically our Patimokkha, our 227 bhikkhu rules that we abide by, having taken my Upasampada, higher ordination, bhikkhu ordination in India into a Theravada Buddhist Sangha. But now living here in Sri Lanka, practicing alone, I'm not really actively part of any, although I'm dependent on and supported by my Sangha in India, I am not part of any particular organised religion, even of that in this country where I'm staying, where their practices, their living arrangements, their day-to-day activities vary quite considerably to what I'm used to either back in Thailand or even in monasteries in my own country. So in that sense, be careful about getting the wrong idea and look at what the Buddha describes as his life in the suttas, living with his Sangha, as the way you want to live. And find monasteries, if you're looking towards ordination, that are living as closely to that as possible, or will enable you eventually to live as closely to that as possible yourself. Because after all, anything else other than that, as the Buddha was living with his disciples, is something that's come about later through and by way of various organisations and religions and cultural influences. So there's just 2 books, but I've just actually listened to one, I think, on Ajahn Suchart's channel about another Thai forest Buddhist monk. If you go to Ajahn Suchart's channel, he's got biographies of monks read out, so you can listen to the audio version of them, or you can find the book to read. That might be a way of finding a list if you want to. But this is just reading, it's entertainment, it's not how to practice necessarily, because those opportunities may not arise in your locality these days or be so easy to practice. Even going into the same areas these days, these biographies were written in the last century, or even before, or even older than that, longer ago than that. Right, seeing that the self is not that which is reborn. Is there any difference between my, his, or her past lives? I don't think gender comes into it. What gender you were in a previous life is irrelevant, largely. So I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm interested in knowing, were you concerned about giving up your belongings, whom to give and what to do with them? How did you finally manage to break yourself free from the stuff you might have had? No, I didn't have any concerns about it or find I had to break myself away from anything. One develops in the practice nibbida, disenchantment with worldly life, and that includes worldly things. You use less and less, and what you're not using is just a thing you don't need, it's in the way. You tend to just get rid of stuff slowly. You don't overnight decide, I'm going to become a Buddhist, I'm giving everything up. This is going to be very difficult, but I'm going to do it. No. You practice and you gradually develop less interest in having lots of soft furnishings around your house, and start to think, well, someone might be able to use this better than I can. So you find somebody who's willing to take it away for you, whether it's down to the local amenity tip, dump, or whether it's something they can use. It's irrelevant. I didn't have a great deal of stuff. I led a very minimalistic life for many years anyway. And when I found through my own practice I needed even less, like I didn't even need a bed, and that gave me a lot more space, I was very grateful that someone will take it away from me. So no problems at all. As for deciding, you can just put stuff outside your front door, I think, and people will take it away. Check on with your neighbours that that's okay, but there's always a home for something. One man's rubbish is another man's treasure. That's not quite the expression. I probably just made that one up. But we all understand that. Rubbish and treasure. Does anyone know how Pali words are pronounced? I thought it was an extinct language. Nobody knows how Pali words are pronounced, which is why I tend to pronounce Pali words phonetically, because I was taught in school when we were learning Latin that we had to pronounce the Latin words phonetically, as we didn't know how the words would have been pronounced. Because we've got no recordings, we weren't there, we don't know. One can assume they had a slightly Italian, the Romans had an Italian accent, like the Greeks would have had a Greek accent, possibly. But one never knows. There are dialects, there are regions, even in my own country, there are so many different accents. So who knows? So we don't try and pronounce, people do, they pronounce Latin, yes, but they generally pronounce these Pali words, some of them are, to help them rhyme in chanting maybe, are a little over-pronounced. Certain letters are maybe over or under-emphasized. In the Pali we do have certain meanings attributed to certain tones to letters, like the letter A and R is the same letter but has an accent across the top. But that's quite common in many languages, to extend the sound of a letter. So that's not so much pronunciation, but the extension of the sound or alteration of the tone of a letter in order to accurately convey the meaning of the word. So avijja is just a, and a in that sense means not knowledge, so ignorance. Avijja means no knowing, so lack of information, ignorance. But a is the not, the negative. But it's not a with a line, so avijja, it's avijja, something like that. But then we don't need to pronounce or know, it doesn't matter. We use these words as a common language for describing meanings of aspects of the Buddha's teachings. It's not a spoken language. It's nothing particularly intellectual about it. It's very simple language, and that's why it's very well. It's advised to try and get to know the core words in Pali, which you can do so very easily through the chanting, through the practice of chanting. One good reason for chanting is to get to know the Pali words that we attribute to so many aspects of the Buddha's teachings that can so easily sum up, like anicca, dukkha, anatta, can so easily sum up in any, from anyone's point of view geographically, whatever language they speak. If they don't speak English or any well-known languages, they can understand, most Buddhists in most countries can understand dukkha as to meaning, whatever it is in their own language, unsatisfactoriness or suffering. You see there immediately I say a few words, even a sentence, to describe dukkha. I don't just say one word. But dukkha in itself, said to any Buddhist, means the same everywhere. Right. Is it understood correctly that everything I experience is mind-made? When I see pradhan, is this the mind looking at a mind-made image? And is this, and if so, by itself harmless, so long as we don't attach to mental image? So no, the mind isn't making this building. My mind is not making these comments or questions I'm reading, or this little kitten sitting on my lap. But my physical brain, my thinking brain, through sense consciousness, is experiencing these comments, this building, this kitten, the atmosphere around me, and interpreting in the mind, and Also, as a result of that interpretation, recollection, as you see already there I've summed up the 5 khandhas and what is created from the rupa, form, body, and the sense organs in the thinking brain, nama. In that sense, vijnana, consciousness, sense consciousness, the experience. Then sankhara are mental formations. So the mental formations are, I'm sitting, reading your comments and questions, talking about those informally. It's warm, it's humid, but I'm comfortable enough, sat here. The kittens keeping me company, keeping me warm as if I wasn't warm enough already. But anyway, she's settled down now, so I won't disturb her. But she's of no bother. These are sankhara, mental formations. In a way, you can say everything is mental formations from our own perception, because it's our own perception that attributes whether we like something, an experience, or an object, or whether we dislike something, an experience, or an object. This, however, though, is judgment, opinion. It's based on recollection, it's based on mental formations. That is mind-made. So if you see Pradhan talking and Pradhan talking is really annoying you, that is not his intention necessarily, but your mental formation, that is mind-made. If he's pleasing you, the same. It is your perception, it is mind-made. But what he's actually doing, his activity, is quite separate from that. It's his own aggregates, 5 aggregates, his own bodily form creating that impression on you. And you can see then all things in this way, that you are not able to control your experience, but you are able to control or understand how you react to that experience through sense contact. Therefore, interrupting the process of becoming attached and liking something, or becoming averse and disliking something, and then wanting more or wanting less, therefore creating desire for to have or desire not to have, the cause of suffering. When you break that link, you eradicate the cause of suffering, become free from suffering. This is the Four Noble Truths. And the Paccittiya Samuppada, the 12 links of dependent origination, are only an extended form, an expanded form on that, specifically the cause of suffering in the Four Noble Truths. But without that even, you can see that. You really want something and you can't have it, it's going to make you suffer. If you've got something you don't want and you don't like that, you're suffering. Either way, it's suffering. When you see it as just that, you can be free from suffering. Right. So, yesterday I heard, this is something I said apparently, that you cannot focus on the breath and thoughts at the same time. Mind is switching so fast it seems to look like we're experiencing breathing and thinking together. Could I please expound on this? I don't really understand that word expound. Does that mean expand upon it? Elaborate upon it? Expound, I'll have to look it up. I think it means speak on a subject. So I've already spoken on the subject, so I won't speak about it again for the risk of boring everybody. But if you think of a film, I think even with modern technology and the way cameras make a video such as this, it's still photographs in frames. I guess so, because it says frames per second on the settings. And the more frames per second there are, the smoother the appearance of the film, indicating that a moving image is made up of lots of separate images. And our minds are much the same. Our minds make a lot of stuff up. This is why we have to be careful of sankhara, mental formations. Because if there's something not there, we don't know that because our minds are very clever at deceiving us and creating the impression that things are there. Now, for most of my life, I've had about 25% of my vision in my right eye missing, not there. And I didn't know this for most of my life. This is a congenital thing. I was born with it. But now, as it transpires, this has been picked up because one has more eye tests when you get older. And first they thought it was one thing, then they thought it was another, and then they decided, well, you've always had that. Well, I didn't know I'd always had that until I now have to regularly have a test which clearly shows that I can't see anything in this spot in my right eye. But my mind's done a wonderful job all of my life of filling in that space. Now, if I close this eye, then I can't see what's going on there. That's never been a problem because I've automatically obviously looked up in that direction. So our mind is continually deceiving us to make our lives run smoothly and to help us make correct judgments from our past experiences. You see, we learn by our mistakes. How? Because we remember what happened. But very often something could be happening that looks close to the same mistake reoccurring, and we can adjust our actions accordingly, but sometimes unnecessarily, because it's just based on the past, which isn't necessarily an indication of the future. So therefore we must be careful, and this is the practice, the understanding in reality of mindfulness, samasati. That's what mindfulness is. It's knowing that all we're experiencing is just that. It's either seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, feeling, or mental formations, sankhara, things we're thinking about as a result of that sense contact. And within those mental formations, a huge amount of filling in from past experience and recollection, sanya. And this we must be aware of. If we go about in a dreamy way, yes, it's just like this, I remember this, then this isn't mindfulness. It's not experiencing everything for what it is in reality, here and now, in this moment. It's recollecting a previous moment, a previous experience, which is necessary in order to understand, in order to know, and in order to act accordingly, but not how we judge, how we determine, how we see things truthfully. We must always look at everything with fresh senses, fresh eyes, fresh hearing, fresh smelling, tasting, touching, and think of every experience as it being our first. This is really truly mindfulness, samasati, right mindfulness. So when I'm breathing, observing my breath, and thoughts are arising, it will seem that this is happening at the same time. But you are directing your awareness, your conscious awareness, from your breath to your thoughts, to your breath to your thoughts. When you can remain on your breath, just observing the breath, the qualities of the breath. This is sati, anapanasati, mindfulness of the breath. The moment you're thinking about breathing, thinking about the breath, you're thinking about breathing, you're thinking about the breath. These are not happening at the same time. Awareness is not thinking. Awareness is just knowing. It's being open to the experience without preconceived ideas, judgment, opinion, predetermined outcomes through expectation. No expectation, no hope. Taking out imagination out of the equation and living an experience here and now, experiencing here and now in the present moment what you are really experiencing truthfully, without comparison, other than where it's necessary, to anything in the past. So, can I expand upon it any further? Not really. Think of it like a film. We think we're multitasking, but we're just thinking like when we're driving a car, we look in the mirror to see behind us. For that moment we're looking in the mirror, we might see through our peripheral vision the road in front, but our focus, our concentration is for a moment on what's behind us until we look back to the front. And we have to keep looking like this. We can't keep one eye on the front and one eye on the back. Our eyes don't work that way physiologically, for the reason that our mind can't deal with that even if we could have an eye on the front and an eye on the back. This is why our eyes are stuck together to have to look both in the same direction. At least they can perceive depth in that sense through 3 dimensions. But what we're experiencing is always on its own. And when we're experiencing 2 things, we're flicking from one to the other. You can experience this like everything I'm always talking about yourself. If you spend the time not distracting yourself with other things, you spend your time meditating. You'll see how your mind works in relation to your breath. You'll know when you're just watching the breath as you feel your breath on the inhalation, as you feel your breath on the exhalation. And then a thought comes up, and then you go back to breathing the breath. Well, it says here, somebody says, I don't understand people asking about your private life just because you're a monk. So I wouldn't say my life isn't private. There's nothing private. My previous life is largely irrelevant, but how I came to be a monk occasionally warrants some explanation. And I don't mind some of the aspects of what you might consider to be my private life also being explained, or I don't mind explaining them, because I think this helps people sometimes understand why I'm practicing the way I'm practicing and how that's come about and how I'm living now. If some questions are inappropriate, then I wouldn't necessarily answer them. But I must say, of all the comments I received, I received so many, they're all of a very positive nature. Most of the comments are just in kind words of encouragement and polite salutations, greetings, and good wishes. And then the comments in themselves, I would say 99.9% of them are useful questions. They may have been heard many times before, but always really warrant further exploration or reiteration. We all need to remind ourselves of the basics in our practice, because it's the basics of our practice which are the most advanced aspects of our practice. It's all well and good having an in-depth understanding of Abhidharma, but if you're not meditating and you're not keeping precepts, then there's no wisdom there. There's just intellectual knowledge. So the advanced level Buddhism is in the sila, keeping of precepts, the practice of meditation. And through that meditation, development of wisdom. That's A-level, advanced level Buddhism. In the basics, so it's necessary. And I'm surprised and amazed, because I've heard stories. I hear people get a lot of not so kind comments or not good comments in social media and things like this, and one might expect it to be a kind of 50-50 thing. But you see the comments as much as I see the comments, and there are no restrictions on the comments. There's nothing held back or restricted. So all comments that are typed in are shown, and they're all very positive and useful and encouraging. So I'll thank you for that support, and please continue with them all. Somebody has moved next to a busy street and there's constant rush of cars. I have two questions. Is white noise like a fan appropriate to help drown out the traffic? And then second question, I have basically a year to practice. Can I still develop to first jhana with the traffic noise, or will I need to find a quieter spot? Well, if you think of what I was just saying about our perception, the traffic noise, yes, can be very annoying, but you're never going to get away from noise, whether it's external noise or when you go into sensory deprivation, you have no external noise. You'd have to find some kind of chamber or some very unique place to achieve that. There are no silent places. The deep forests and jungles where monks often live and practice, they're by no means silent. You have all sorts of jungle creatures. Cicadas, for instance, are very noisy. Their decibel levels are as high as a chainsaw, you know, really screaming sound like a chainsaw. And they're sporadic. They're not a constant noise you can get used to. So there's always noise. So you will develop patience towards this noise. Using additional noise like white noise, a fan or something, it may help smooth that. It may help direct your attention of hearing to something else. But be careful always of using accessories to aid your meditation. It's better to become used to the sound that may be annoying you at the moment, and accept that it's a constant. Traffic noise isn't that. I can even hear traffic noise here. You've got to go a long way into the real inner parts of Sri Lanka to get away from any sort of form of traffic noise. See, I don't know whether you heard that then. That's one of these very loud buses that make a terrible racket all of the time. You can always hear these sounds, but you don't notice them unless you're listening out for them after a while. I've been living in very noisy places. I've also lived in very quiet places. The sound, the noise we cannot get away from is the noise created in our own mind. The thoughts, the thinking process, the repetitive tunes, or the questions that are coming up. This is the noise that is the hindrance to jhana. To attain to first jhana, you will be secluded from the 5 hindrances. But in that, you also have to have dealt with the 5 hindrances. Not dealt with as in got rid of the thing that's annoying you, like a sound, like the road noise, the traffic in your case, but come to accept it as seeing it clearly as something that you don't want. And it's that you not wanting it is what's causing the suffering. And once you see that, you've found the antidote to that aversion, that not wanting, and you've been able to relinquish yourself from that suffering by accepting that it is just there. It is just that sound, the ears hearing sound. So nothing other than the usual 5 hindrances is in your way of attaining to first jhana. Now there are some specific sounds. Animals in distress, babies or children in distress, often the sound of the voice, people talking, if you understand the language, or the tone of a voice, if it's attractive to you or unattractive to you, and also musical tunes that resonate with you, because of course some forms of music in some cultures is not music to some people, so then it's not so much of a problem. So I hear some music here that's I don't consider musical, so it doesn't distract me. It's just noise, it's sound. Whereas if I was to hear certain pop tunes of my youth continually played in the background, it would be disturbing because it would evoke memories, emotions, thinking, and it would be difficult to attain to any levels of samadhi with that kind of sound. So certain kinds of sound, specifically distressed beings, entertainment which is designed to attract the mind and the senses and the attention and evoke emotion, It's designed that way, music, entertainment, and voices talking about, you know, subjects that are going to attract your attention are going to need to be avoided. But most people can avoid that. Now, if you've got a person with a television next door emitting all of those things quite loudly, it is difficult. And often you have to think about finding somewhere else to go and practice your meditation until you really are skilled at meditation to a level whereby you can really zone out long enough to attain to jhana. But normally speaking, these things are difficult to overcome. But traffic noise, you shouldn't be too concerned about. That's quite a consistent and something you can get used to. I've often lived in places where even here there's traffic noise. I have the tuk-tuks go by occasionally here. The train you hear, albeit it's not all the time. All the time traffic noise is actually easier to deal with than occasional passers-by, because occasional passers-by means something. Oh, someone's coming or someone's going. Whereas if there's consistent, continuous traffic noise like that coming from a motorway, a highway, or whatever you call them, big roads, dual carriageway, then that's just a consistent sound that you can just, sound is sound, ears hearing sound. Do you think mindfulness practices like this help us more than traditional prayer? So I've highlighted the end of a long email there, long comment. Someone was just saying this is good that we are using the chanting as reflections on the quality of the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, and also reflections on the teachings of the Buddha, rather than prayers or forms of worship. And do you think that mindfulness practices like this help us more than traditional prayer? Yes, of course. What is traditional prayer? Not sure from what origin you are, but traditional prayer means asking for something. Now, Buddhism is not teaching us to ask any external thing for anything, but to look internally to find the answers for ourselves and answer our own questions, to help ourselves. We're not asking others to help us. We're finding the ways through our practice to help ourselves. So, of course, I don't believe in traditional prayer in the sense of praying to God to make me healthy and live long. Is just words and actions that mean nothing. No, God can help me live healthily and for a long time. But if I treat the body well, it should remain as healthy as it possibly can for as long as it possibly will. And accepting that is wisdom. Thinking someone can change that course of events by you merely asking is what we call avijja, in the sense of not understanding, or delusion even, confusion. Because this isn't Buddhism. This is other religions, theistic religions, where you put your faith and trust in a creator, a God. But in Buddhism, we practice, we teach ourselves by taking the Dharma, the words of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha, putting them into practice and seeing for ourselves the results of that practice. So, maybe a short one if there is one. No, that's quite a long one. So I think for now, that should be sufficient. I really don't want to disturb this poor little kitten now. She's gone to sleep, but I will have to move and continue my day. If there's something useful, I hope you can use it. If not, just let it go and don't let it bother you. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu. Oh, sorry to disturb you. But I'm coming back